It's the end of the day with Ray. Hello, my friends. Well, folks, today I want to discuss HP and Canon, and the title of this is Arrogance and Imagination Incompetence. You can see on the Sharp Interactive board we have a sign, end of the road. Are things coming to an end between HP and Canon? Is the HP and Canon relationship going to get really, really pressured and strained? I believe it is. I believe that friends will become frenemies, and some frenemies might even become enemies as the industry continues to consolidate and constrict. And today what I want to do is I want to talk about why I believe HP and Canon have way too much arrogance and are completely incompetent with imagination. I'm going to start with Canon, and then I'm going to share some thoughts around HP. But ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if you all remember, how long ago was it when HP started selling their OEM toner at the same price as the remanufacturing toner? Was that around 2020? You know, folks, here's the rumor, and of course, you know, Canon or HP can go in the comments and clarify this, but there was an agreement, and it was rumored to be called the Bento Agreement, and that agreement was Canon was going to sell HP, you know, products really, really cheap so that HP could go out in the marketplace and wipe out all the remanufacturers. And I got to be honest, when they started doing that, it was pretty tough on those friends of mine that remanufactured toner. But how long ago was that? 2020? I mean, 5 years, 6 years? I mean, isn't that thing going to end pretty soon? And folks, you know, a lot of people think that the HP leadership runs HP print. I always believe that the Canon leadership runs HP print. Seriously, I think HP did whatever the hell Canon told them to do. And I think that now, well, HP is getting a little bit more arrogant because obviously you've heard their CEO running around talking about putting AI in PCs and HP is going to change the world, okay? So maybe he got a little bit too big for his britches and he's starting to take some power away from Canon, who knows? But folks, at the end of the day, Canon, can they continue to give pricing to HP that's not really favorable to Canon's profitability? And by the way, folks, you know, Canon, they just had a big, gigantic impairment charge in their medical device business, in their medical business, right? And I'm thinking, is that medical business going to drag down Canon like the medical business over at Konica dragged them down? Folks, there's got to be some adjustments as the market changes, right? What was the dumbest thing Canon ever did? Talk about being arrogant. I mean, folks, I remember this well. Remember when Xerox was going to buy HP and they're like, if they buy HP, we're never going to do business. I mean, this was so stupid. Like, you know, you got HP, you got Xerox, the largest provider of print equipment to end users in the world, the biggest footprint, and Canon was making most of the HP stuff, and they're going to say, oh, we're not going to make your stuff if you get together with Xerox. How stupid is this? I mean, they should have supported this. If they didn't have imagination and competence, the CEO of Canon would have supported this. And today, they would be delivering Canon through the largest footprint in the world. This would have been an amazing thing. I'm convinced of it. I wouldn't be surprised if Canon ended up joining in the HP Xerox thing with equity position, because they would have realized how big this really is. But no, their arrogance got in the way. Ladies and gentlemen, when I think about Canon, I discuss their billion-dollar impairment charge they had in the medical business unit. But, you know, their operating profit is still good at 6.2%. But, you know, Canon, they like to be at 9 and 10, you know. And you got to give Canon credit. I mean, at the end of the day, they had a billion-dollar impairment charge and they still squeaked out operating profit above the line. If that had been Konica, it would have been a complete disaster, right? But when I think about HP's down in the print business by 15% if you go back to the year 2021. And folks, that's nearly $3 billion in revenue. And when you think about HP and what they give Canon as a percentage of Canon's revenue, I mean, there's numbers out there, 10%, 15% of the total Canon revenue. HP is providing Canon with a whole lot of revenue. And I'm guessing probably a pretty good profit, you know. But at the end of the day, if HP's print continues to decline the way it's been declining, how does that position Canon? And then if Canon starts getting really aggressive from a manufacturing perspective or joining a group like Etria, how will that affect the relationship with HP? You know, folks, I mean, these are all realistic things. You saw the Canon CEO, I did an episode on this talking about how they want to go to a fabless manufacturing on their low-end printers and cameras. Well, what does HP sell? Mostly low-end printers from Canon, right? They want to outsource this? Well, if they're going to outsource it, why the hell would HP even need Canon? Folks, I'm telling you right now, there's going to be some big changes, and Canon's going to be a big player in those changes. Quite honestly, I'm surprised they haven't started their own manufacturing consolidation, which leads me to believe they're going to join Etria. I'm beginning to think that Canon is really just going to be a follower, and I find it amazing that a company like Canon would actually be a follower of a company like Ricoh. I mean, seriously. But that's what it's kind of shaping up to. I mean, it's going to be really surprising when one day we all wake up and realize, oh my God, the most aggressive OEM in the space around bringing manufacturing together is Ricoh. One of the poorest financially performing OEMs is the one that got the most aggressive. I just think that's going to be crazy if that's what we end up realizing. But you know, the HP Canon deal, you know, when you think about HP, when they bought Samsung back in 2017, they got some manufacturing capacity in Korea around their A3 products. Does everybody believe that everything can stay the same at HP and Canon? I just don't think so, folks. You got to really start digging into this. I think about this Etria. You know, Ricoh, they started out with 85%. Toshiba Tech had 15%. They brought in Oki. When they brought in Oki, the percentage at Ricoh dropped to 80.74%, Toshiba Tech 14.25%, and Oki 5.01%. What's going to happen when Brother joins that? You know, we all saw the big news. I did an episode on it where Ricoh, because they, well, basically they're poor planners. They lack imagination themselves over there at Ricoh. They never came up with an A4 strategy, so they had to reach out to Brother and say, hey, we're in trouble now. We don't have an A4 strategy. We want to sell your machines. Well, I think that's just first step for them joining Etria. Brother is financially pretty strong, right? I mean, seriously. Maybe Brother is going to go to Ricoh and say, look, we'll join Etria, but we want like 25% equity, which will take more and more away from Ricoh, right? And then if Canon comes in, you know, if I'm Canon and I go to Etria, I'm going to want to have the majority equity. So we see Ricoh actually lose the majority equity in Etria. If Canon and Brother join in the fun, will Canon and Brother join in the fun? Folks, that's why you got to have an imagination, which both obviously HP and Canon lack completely. Let's talk about this Amplify program. To talk about HP a little bit. You know, this Amplify program was just a piece of crap, you know, seriously. And when this came out, I was really, really vocal on this. I did all kinds of episodes. I mean, folks, I was the only one of all the industry's media analysts that even talked about this in any kind of negative way. And the reason I want to talk about it in a negative way, because I was super concerned for all those dealer friends of mine. What the hell are you doing? Giving away your data. You know, when you were giving away your data back in 2020, I kept telling you, it's not about what you think the data you're giving away is. It's going to be about what the future technology can mine from your data. And now what are we talking about? AI. Ladies and gentlemen, I was 100% correct. Yeah, speaking of being arrogant, I guess I was a little arrogant there, but I was 100% correct. What did I tell you all? Don't give away your data willy-nilly. Don't give away your data based on what you comprehend that data to be valued at. Because sooner or later, technology will mine your data in ways that you could not even have imagined. And here we are today with that. And I got to tell you, all those folks that gave HP all this data through the Amplify agreement, good luck. Because things are going to change, I assure you. You know, when I think about HP and I think about the leader, you know, how long till one's vision becomes delusion? I have zero confidence in the leadership over there at HP, and I've had for a long time. I mean, their CEO has spent his entire tenure buying back their own shares. That's his big deal. I'm going to buy back those shares. I mean, folks, we're talking about billions of dollars, like $14 billion worth of stock buybacks. Totally insane. But that's their strategy. And you got to ask yourself, what the hell are they doing? When you look at their top line revenue for the whole company with personal systems and print, it's a disaster if you compare it to the peak revenue of 2022. You know, in 2022, HP did $62.9 billion worth of revenue. Their FY 2024, they did $53.6 billion. Seriously. I mean, you have to go back to the year 2017 to find a lower total revenue than they produced in 2024. Think about that. And ladies and gentlemen, you can't forget about Poly. And I know I keep bringing this up, but I want you all to get it in your head. You know, that was $1.7 billion worth of revenue. So we're talking about a company that's down $12 billion from the 2022 number. And their CEO acts like it's not a big deal. We're going to put AI in PCs and everything's going to be fantastic. And I kept telling him, it doesn't really matter if you put AI in PCs because that's going to be a damn permission to show up in PCs. And who doesn't understand that? You know, I mean, surely the HP CEO understands that AI in PCs is a permission to show up, not some HP invention, right? The stock buybacks, folks, you know, just do some research on this for yourself because it's just so absurd. I mean, $14 billion. And when you look at what they bought the stock for and what the stock is selling for today, and this was, you know, at 6/23 of 2025, the stock was at $24.06 a share. You know, it's the same price it was on 11/30 of 2020. Yeah, he made a killing on buying their own stock back. And all this nonsense, well, the only reason we got to buy our stock back is because we don't want to be taken over by Xerox like we almost got taken over. In all reality, the best thing that could have ever happened to HP is they got taken over by Xerox. Because today, they would be delivering all their compute products. They would have a service business, you know, a real service business, along with a hardware business. They would have so much power with all print manufacturers. But no, you see, HP was way too arrogant, and they completely lacked any kind of an imagination, just like their friends over there at Canon. What a missed opportunity. Instead, let's just run around and buy up our own shares and call it good. How crazy is this? You know, speaking of shares, I wanted to look at HP leaders and see what they're selling. You know, HP, all the leaders are selling their shares. Over here at Xerox, they're buying shares. So that's the difference. So, you know, y'all can talk bad about Xerox all you want, but their leaders are buying their shares. The folks over at HP, you know, they're the best company in the world, according to their CEO. The ones that are going to put AI in PCs and the whole world's going to love HP and it's going to make it game-changing for them. Well, they're out there selling their shares. It's just something to think about, right? Ladies and gentlemen, HP's leadership missed every single target I think they've ever shot at. I think their strategy is falling short of their goals, if they even have real goals. You know, I've recently heard that they're making some changes in their services business unit with some leaders, and you know, I'm trying to verify that, but it doesn't surprise me because I don't even think they have a services business. And whoever might have been leading it or is leading it probably is like, what the hell am I doing here? Why don't I go where there's a real service business? But ladies and gentlemen, you got to admit, what is HP's target? What is their strategy? What has their CEO ever said regarding any kind of strategy at HP? Nothing. He says nothing. He goes on and talks word salads about AI and PCs and subscription print without validating any of the subscriptions, you know. And remember the notebooks? They used to sell a lot of notebooks, right? Then they stopped selling a lot of notebooks. So what did HP do? Well, let's stop telling the world how many notebooks we're selling. I mean, so they modify their financials in a way where they can hide stuff. They have absolutely no strategy whatsoever. Their CEO is completely imagineless, along with the CEO of Canon. So I do believe it's the end of the road. I think HP's just stuck there. You know, if anybody's going to get away from that end of the road sign, it's probably going to be Canon. You know, do they turn to the right? Do they turn to the left? Do they look for something different? I think they are. Because, ladies and gentlemen, you got to admit, HP has been a pretty big disappointment. And when you think about Canon, I think they're a little bit more, well, they have a little bit more stewardship to their profitability. And I think they're going to respond to the market in ways that a lot of folks might not be able to imagine. That is, if Canon can actually use their imagination. Because everybody watching me knows this. Status quo is the killer of all that'll be invented. Don't get stuck there, and I'll see you all tomorrow.